they go to the Olympics. That's the crazy part. They actually make the Olympics. Like they show up and they participate. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. This is an amazing, amazing episode. And I'm so excited to share how one of my most complex cases that I am proud to be a part of that tested every aspect of my training up until that point, a non-operative ACL returning to high-level sport, actually returning to the Olympics in 6 weeks. And yes, this is true. This is 100% true. And for those of you who know me, I've shared this story before, and I think it's critical for every single clinician out there to hear about the lessons learned, the journey, and how it impacts your clinical practice. So before I go on to the show and the episode, just what's happening in life, what's new, what's better. I wrote a newsletter recently on my email list about quad strains and a couple things that are happening at Sports Performance and the lessons I'm learning off of coaching and mentoring my team. And my weekend away, I went to Big Bear, and for those of you guys don't know, Big Bear is a great mountain town with ski slopes, except it didn't snow. So we were literally just hiking and hanging out with the fam. So it was good, good time away. But on the way home, unfortunately, we have a leak in our house. So we're getting that settled right now, literally as we speak. And yeah, there's always something. There's literally always something going on in the background. So we came home to a leaky tub. So I'm trying to conquer that at the moment. But yeah, that's what's happening in life. Life is good. The kids are good. My baby Jacob is growing. My wife Stephanie. Life is fantastic. So really excited actually at the time of this recording. I'll be hanging out with my team tomorrow morning. We have a quarterly team outing. So tomorrow we will be at the beach relaxing. So I'm excited for that. All right, on to the podcast. Is this real? 100%. Is this case real? What are the ins and the outs? How did this happen? I'll give you the backstory. But in summary, as I go into this, understand what I'm about to tell you today, I wouldn't recommend using this with every single ACL. I'm going to share a story that some of you will have 1% in your career, one time, maybe 2 times in your career. It will help. But what it will help is your framework and how you help people and what is possible. Let me explain. If there's one thing I love, is complex cases. Like I just love complex cases because it makes me think. It challenges every aspect of who I am and what I've ever done as a clinician. And I enjoy the cases, I really do. And this one hit home. This was really tough. I had to call a lot of people, a lot of my mentors, and nobody had seen this before. So it's a case that I was able to proudly manage with the help of people who've mentored me along the way, but figure things out and help a person achieve their dream. And let me explain. So it was, I think, late May, early June of 2012. And the year is very important because we're going into the 2012 Olympics in London. And most people weren't flying out. Just so you guys know, most athletes, depending on your sport, depending on your funding, depending on your team, will fly out to the Olympics about 4 weeks ahead of time. And what that means is the staff and everybody setting up is easily out there a month early. And what they're doing is getting acclimated. If you were on my last podcast, you'd understand acclimating and all those other things. Then there are some athletes who maybe might not go 4 weeks out. They're going to go out 2 to 3 weeks out. They want to spend more time in their home environment. They want to get more practice in their home field, whatever it is. And so that might be a funding thing or a personal preference. So we had an athlete who was in a tournament in June. So we're about 6 weeks out for the Olympics. And this is London. And I get a phone call. And it actually is from my direct report. And he says, Quincy, if you're listening to this, I hope you enjoy this because this was a big part of your mentorship and the whole process. But he said, you know, I need your help. Here's what's about to happen right now. He was out of town, and he says, we have a case coming your way. And I was home. I was in Chula Vista at the Olympic Training Center. He says, hey, we got a tough case. He said, can you handle it? I said, what do you got? He tells me, hey, we have a superstar athlete, #1 in the country, who might have injured their knee. He didn't give me specifics. He says they're flying home today. It happened yesterday, and they're flying home today, and they're going to get imaging today. And we need to sort out what's going to happen to this person prior to the Olympics. Are they in or are they out? That was his wording, and I remember that. And I said, oh man, so you're going to put the pressure on me. And he was out of town. So, I mean, he gave me the case, and he said, I'll help out wherever I can. And the imaging came out that it was a tear of the ACL. And here we are 6-7 weeks out. And let me give you a little context. Anytime an athlete, I don't care what the sport is, whether you're BMX or you're swimming or you're archery or you do any sport, field hockey, it doesn't matter. Every one of those humans has worked really hard for a certain amount of time. And it could be 10 years, it could be 12 years, it could be somebody who just got in the sport like 4 years ago and they happen to be a superstar. Either way, they're putting in time and effort. And for those of you who don't know the life of an athlete, let me tell you something. That is not easy. It seems really glamorous, but it's not easy. I treat them regularly. I've lived in that world. I get it. It's kind of like Groundhog's Day. And we had an athlete that walked into sports performance recently, and I got to be careful about how I phrase things. So I said, how are you? And they mentioned they're like, same as yesterday, the same thing. Nothing new. I literally go home, train, I sleep, I train, I eat, I sleep, and repeat. That's it. That's literally their life. And they have to go to sleep by like 9 or 10. Think about this. If they're training full time, they're not, consuming alcohol. They're not like partying. They're not drinking. They're not eating bad things. They're literally training. Most people call that like a, clean lifestyle. That's just their lifestyle all year long. And you might have like some ebbs and flows. They're human too, but it's a hard lifestyle. And most of these people have worked, 4 to 8 years dreaming of something, dreaming of what they've always wanted to accomplish, like that one thing since they were in high school, since they were in college, since they were a professional athlete over the last few years. They just want to accomplish one thing. That's as if you were, going to PT school or whatever your degree is in, and you're coming to one moment, and that defines whether you get the certificate or not, or the license or certification or not. That's pretty tough. Like that, actually, when you put it in that context, imagine, yeah, we can take the test, but we can take it again within a couple of weeks or a couple of months or whatever it is. We have multiple tries. They have to wait another 4 years to be able to do this when you're talking about the Olympics. So when you understand the mindset of these people, and they're dreaming of these things, they want to accomplish this one dream. And so when I got that call and they said, hey, they're going to be coming down today, imaging's going to show, and we get the wet report, the wet read, telling us like it's a tear. Oh, all right. So now what are we going to do? It's the question. And so I get on a phone call and I talked to this athlete, and K-Dubs, if you're listening to this, I hope you appreciate this story. I loved every moment of it. I get on a phone call and they're going to be on my schedule tomorrow morning. And I said, what's the game plan? What are we doing? Talk to the surgeon. Surgeon says, no go. Where you can't. We can stop. We can operate, but they're out of the equation for the games. And I said, wait, what about non-operative? Are they in the games or not? And they said, there's a chance. And they said, what magic can you work? And I was like, great. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you give me a complex case, I'm in, especially when you're talking about somebody whose hopes and dreams are in, like, not your hands, but they're like, you can help that, you can influence that. And to me, I'm in. You put me in, coach, I'm in. So we see the athlete the next day, and they explain kind of the history. And this person was a javelin athlete. So when you go to throw something, you're going to have whatever, how many steps you take, and then you're going to finally step on one foot, usually your non-dominant arm, opposite from the non-dominant arm. So if it's your right arm, it's going to be your left leg. It's called your blocking leg. So that leg comes down and you stiffen it as hard as you can. You go straight into extension. Some people go into knee hyperextension. And so when they go into hyperextension and then they throw, that all the forces that they've sprinted and they're just culminating at the arm to be able to throw, right? Imagine, a baseball pitcher throwing the ball. That left arm comes in, and that right arm comes in and throws everything on it, and that left leg in baseball is bent, right? They're just throwing down. But in javelin, it's knee extension and even hyperextension. So they had torn it during an event while throwing. And so I say, is this possible? I talked to the athlete and they said, I don't know, but I'm going to do it. I said, I respect that 100%. I'm not the one who's put in 4 years for this, or 8 years, or whatever the amount was. I said, then I'm going to help. They said, is it possible? I said, let's do it. I'm not going to say no. If you've ever seen me treat, you ever see me work with an athlete, I'm not setting the tone until I understand what their motivation is. I need to know, how invested are you? Is this your dream? Then I'll make it happen. I don't know. I've had athletes in crazy situations, and I'll share more complex cases, but this is just one of them. This is a tough one. How do you get a non-operative ACL on a blocking leg from javelin, full hyperextension, medial rotation, like stress on the ACL and no ACL? Like, I mean, how do you do that? All right, so here's the 6-week progression. Here's the 6-week protocol. And this athlete was coming in, I think, at number 1 for the sport. So I said, let's do it, and they said, what's the plan? And this is where I was getting into progressions. If you've heard any of my podcasts, any of my content, you're taking any of my courses, and if you're going to take my course next month, March 12th and 13th of 2022, some of this content will be in there. Nonetheless, progressions are life. What PT school teaches you is how to tactically take care of a joint, and then take care of a shoulder joint and a knee joint. And yeah, there's some movement like courses that you can take to connect them all. But above that, nobody teaches you what you should do from phase 1 injury to week 1, to week 2, to week 3, to week 4, to week 5. And you might follow soft tissue healing progressions, but how would you take them out for a full year? How do you get an ACL 6 weeks backwards? How do you get a meniscus repair as fast as possible, get onto the field within 4 months? Is that possible? I don't know. You just got to work backwards. It's injury progressions. And around this time, I was developing more of that passion for this. So, and this is before Google Sheets and Google had all this stuff. So it was Microsoft Excel sheets. And I remember going on an Excel sheet and I was like, okay, so I have a deadline at 6 and I have somebody presenting. What can I do in 6 weeks? What is possible? Imagine this knee was ballooned up. I mean, it's a non-operative ACL. Now I got to have fluid-filled knee joint back to highest level performance in the world, competing with competitors. A lot of homework. So I said, what can I work with here? And I said, do I have permission? I asked the boss, I said, hey, do I have permission to work 7 days a week? They said, thumbs up. All right. If I know that, can I go 2 days? Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I'm unlimited at this point with time. Yes, within 6 weeks. So then here comes the argument that I have with a lot of clinicians. Sometimes I get it. People say like, hey, well, if I can treat somebody 2 or 3 times a day, I can get them better. Really? What would you do different from one day to the next? What would Monday look differently than Wednesday, and look differently than Friday, and then look differently than Saturday and Sunday? How would you lay out the full week? Would you do more aggressive? Would you do less aggressive? Are you going to do the same old clamshells and single leg balance and single leg RDLs and blah, 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 all the same stuff every week, every day? No, there has to be a linear progression literally into their sport and specific for them. And guess what? You have to actually work with their coaches and their strength coach to ensure that they don't lose like any actual technical skill or any strength as much as possible. And you got to work with sports psych to make sure they're good to go. We just had a client today, an athlete, soccer player who tested, I think they're 10 months out from an ACL, and they're at 90% with like functional testing, 80% subjective report, and psych testing prior to return to sport. So it's funny how that physical and mental component got to be big. They're huge. They play a massive role, and sometimes that confidence is even more of a bigger deal. So the question became, even if I had unlimited time within 6 weeks, I could treat them 7 days a week, multiple times a day, up to 2, 3 times a day. What would you do? How would you lay that out? And who you're going to build on your team? Because you're the lead at that point. You are the chef. You're the captain. If you've heard my podcast on that before, whoever is captaining that phase of rehab gets to say what happens. And very rare, PTs, I call us very respectfully 6-week to 12-week specialist, right? Like that's what insurance usually covers. So anything before that typically is hard to get. Anything after that is like insurance may or may not cover. And we just kind of like say we do strength conditioning and like return to sport, but it's only like 1 or 2 sessions a month, and they're really just kind of going back to sport on their own. And I had to come to terms with, okay, so I have 7 days a week. I can split it up, A/B splits, like morning session, afternoon session, and I got to work with strength conditioning. What else can we do so they don't lose arm strength, core strength to be able to accelerate and get that javelin out of their fingertips? And the coach to work on like technical skill, but they can't sprint, they can't run. I'm the limiting factor. So we worked backwards, and 2-a-days helped tremendously. I think that we were trying to figure out, okay, so if we work backwards, how are we going to get this swelling out as fast as possible? So we literally taped any form of elastic taping that we could to get the swelling out. No draining. We actually didn't drain the joint. I remember this now. There was no draining of the joint. We went natural, because it actually started within 72 hours. It's already starting to drop down, but we couldn't go aggressively. So we did soft tissue swelling protocol. So we taped it. We had ACE bandage all waking hours, foot elevated. They basically took a Normatec home, and they were living and breathing in the Normatec while non-elevated or ambulating. Yes, they were on crutches. So they lived in the dorm. So, I mean, that was only like a few feet away from the medical center. So they would come to medical, and then I had them work with nutrition to help out on anything we can do to decrease swelling. They work with the acupuncturist to help decrease swelling as well. So we had acupuncture, we had nutrition, and they work with sports psych. And all of those are out of my domains. But what I did need to know is, like, if you had a perfect team, who would you put on that team? So you have to be able to work with people. And I've done a podcast on this. I really think that it's critical, especially in cases like this. What I'm saying is, for some of you, you'll never have a case like this in your world, in your life. For me, this is one of many, only because I wanted these cases. I love these cases now. I really do. I appreciate them, and I think they really challenge your skill set as a clinician, as a human. How much do you care? How much passion do you have to help somebody? And for this person, I mean, I remember talking to my wife and telling her, this is going to be a rough 6 weeks for us, because I am very passionate about my job, and I'm very passionate about getting this person to do the one thing they've trained a large portion of their life for. And, make sure that you choose your partner wisely, because my wife was so patient with me and she understood. She's like, I totally get what you're trying to do. And, I respect that. So enjoy the time, do what you need to do. So we'd show up twice a day, even Sundays. I remember this. Sundays we did occasional one a days, just because sometimes I think that, we think that doing more is going to change everything, and sometimes people need absolute rest. There are days where we did relative rest, and just like active recovery things, and then there was days where we did absolute rest, where it was go watch Netflix, put that leg up, be on Normatec, hydrate, do ankle pumps, everything that you can possibly do. Use the brace, use the wrap, use taping, all those things, and swelling reduction, so we can keep that moving. So first stage was to get rid of that as soon as possible. But in the background, while they were seeing those other medical professionals, healthcare professionals, they were also working with strength conditioning on core strength, upper body strength, so that didn't diminish. Working with working with their technical coach to make sure that they didn't lose any skill set as much as possible. And you got to realize that, like, it's impossible for you to lose nothing. I mean, when you're injured and you are not training at the same intensity, it's impossible. So work with the whole staff. Within the first week, we were working on ambulation, weight bearing is tolerated. We started doing core work, hip drills, standing drills, single leg balance, anything we could to simulate weight bearing. Now, people always ask me this, okay, do you be more aggressive on the front end or on the back end? Like in the first 2 weeks or the last 2 weeks? And my current frame of thought after having a lot of these cases, I'm more aggressive on the later stages. And why? Because I think that if you can minimize swelling and you can get somebody to a point where they feel semi-normal, I think that gives them a couple things. Confidence is one of the major ones. They're like, actually, I'm doing great. And then when you push it, I think it gives them an opportunity to like come in a little bit more confident, full throttle, so they feel good about your progressions. Versus you flare them up from the beginning, they're like, I'm never going to make it. I'm never going to get better. And so I think I've realized more than ever that I will go a little bit more conservative. I'm still pushing the limit, but I'm going more conservative, weight bearing, plyometrics, impact, all those things. I'm adding them in the later stages because I don't want to flare them up, because I think that changes their perspective of where they're at. So first 3 days, get the swelling out. We're still doing ambulation. We're still doing core work. We're still doing any form of activation. All the traditional stuff. Yes. So they had about an hour of homework of like corrective exercises that they had to do for me, probably about 2 to 3 times a day. Plus, then I worked on swelling reduction, bringing up their confidence, making sure they knew every day what the plan was so they can forecast. So I would have to create an Excel spreadsheet of what the week looks like. And normally we don't have to do that. Normally that's like a coach or a strength and conditioning strategy. But if you're a medical professional working with high-level athletes, one of the best things you can do is set the tone, give it to them, and make sure that they know what the whole plan is the entire time. And what we did at that point was set that tone from the beginning. We knew the first 3 days was swelling reduction. We knew that first 5 days was going to be based on gait. Get everything, get quad activated, get VMO going, get weight bearing, get single leg balance, so that the confidence would be there. So we had coaches working on stuff, strength conditioning working on stuff, nutrition working on stuff, sports psych. And I'm basically the captain from the medical side. Okay, what's next? What are we allowing to do? So the next question became, how aggressive can we go in this first 2 weeks? So we pushed the quad. So they basically lived on E-stem, any form of neuro re-ed. We put them in the Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill so that they can start weight bearing right away. We had them working in aquatic therapy. So they were, I think we put them at 75%. So they were above like armpit level into water, if not just a little slightly lower. So we could do aquatic work. We can do anti-gravity. We had them on E-stem plus Normatec on a regular basis, literally hourly. So when you have the resources like this, that's amazing, because what you can do in 72 hours with the right resources, proper nutrition, great sports psych, some acupuncture, some anti-inflammatories, good coaching, good strength work, access to an Ultra G plus aquatic work plus E-stem and Normatec all day, every day, and the ability to not have to worry about work. They can literally just go to the room and be inverted most of the afternoon. That's fantastic. Actually, healing is pretty good, especially when they're super compliant. They're just literally like following it to a T. And that's the basic thing that they had. They had a full roadmap, right? Like, this is what the next 5 days look like. Don't mess it up. And that puts it on the onus on me, the clinician, to set the tone for the week. So based on how they were doing every day, you adjust it. And that way everybody knew what was a green light, yellow light, or red light to what the next phase was. So then the strength coach would ask, okay, so Can we do squats? Oh, man. Oh, partial. Why? Because they're not strong yet. Okay. To what depth? To a box. How high? 18 inches, right? Like, so you actually have to go mathematically, like, what is the shear stress? What's the load? What's going to give them the most bang for their buck? They're like, okay, so what about deadlifts? Can I pull from the ground? Yes. Right. Like, so we had to go through all of these phases. They can do all upper body. They can do all core work. They can do hip strategy, based exercise. It's not a problem, but the challenge became, when can they push or pull with any form of dynamic movement? And if it was vertical or linear, is that a problem? So we worked and navigated through this and basically created a program so that they had closed chain, concentric first week, eccentric second week, full gait without swelling, and full return to walking by week 2. Okay, we got the swelling out, VMO is activated, and you have to understand some of these, when you work with 1%ers, and what I say by that is, these pro athletes are 1% of high school kids will go to like college and do it in college. 1% of college athletes will go professional. 1% of those people will then make it to like USA Nationals, and 1% of those people will actually like make it to the Olympics, and 1% of those people will actually like medal. So when you're dealing with like the 1% of the 1% of the 1%, it's amazing. They've gotten there for a reason. Yeah, they're talented, but they also have different healing rates too. In kids, I call it youth juice. Like, they just have something different. They're under 18. It's easy. But for athletes who are adults and they are professional athletes, they have something different too. And so when you work with these individuals, there is a little bit of a difference in the way they like manage their healings and what they're able to tolerate. And the acceleration of it is pretty amazing. So to watch this VMO literally just grow like a plant, it was pretty cool to watch over 2 weeks. But the key there was, don't flare it up. Do not flare it up. Don't be superstar. Don't start adding in plyos too soon, too early. That came up as a question. When do you do it? So we did first 3 days, soft tissue swelling, get it out, all of the modalities as much as possible. And here's another caveat. So when PTs ask me like, hey, do you use ultrasound? Do you use E-stem? Do you like, why? Like, who cares? When? With who? What's the case? How urgent? In this case, this person lived on E-stem, lived on it. Why? Because it was specific to the case. Now, am I doing it to like truly strengthen and like increase hypertrophy? No, I'm just doing it for activation. Do some BFR and add in, weight bearing stuff as tolerated. But ultimately, we threw the whole kitchen sink at this person, and they were totally up for it, because they're like, I literally have 6 weeks to get whatever I can. So they will take the like 1% healing, just a little bit better. They would, I'll tell you this, they would take anything they could to get the edge, to be able to compete safely. So first 2 weeks were that, get them into walking, then became strength and plyos. Remember, this leg is the blocking leg on a javelin athlete. So the left leg is the blocking leg for a right-handed athlete, and vice versa. On a left-handed athlete, the right leg is the blocking leg. So that knee has to be prepared to go into hyperextension, maybe even full extension. So one of the things that we did was we ordered a brace, functional kind of knee brace. And what we did with that is we had to wait till they had as much as their muscle girth as possible. So we ordered that, knowing that they would be semi-symmetrical to the opposite side. Had that ordered. That took about a week to get, and then from there we had to understand, okay, so how do we block this leg from going to the hyperextension, but also allowing them to perform? So I think we did somewhere in the range of like 3 to 5 degrees of knee flexion. So we had to allow for a little bit of knee flexion, even though they were going to be limited their performance because they can't get that knee all the way back. So we used the brace, and I mentioned that this person was literally being taped every single day. And then they were also being done with an ACE wrap and a compression sleeve on top of that, plus the knee brace. So what you have is this knee that's just being like tightened down as much as possible. Now, when it came to practice, we actually started practicing lateral walking and ladder drills at week 2. And the whole reason was just to simulate like what we need to do to get into that javelin, like lateral ambulation or lateral approach. So we started ladder drills, we started cone drills. We had a unique device, and I can't even remember the name of it, but basically it was a vertical uh, it was almost like a leg press, except you're standing up and you would push down and it would go down and come right back at you. So it only worked on the concentric portion. So it didn't give you so much soreness. So there was just a lot of like very intricate design devices that we had access to. But nonetheless, we worked on strength, worked on lateral drills at week 2, just for the confidence building and allowing them to feel what's about to happen. We didn't have any flare-ups. We went really, really gradual. They lived in the brace plus all the garments underneath. And then at that point, so once they started getting to week 3, this is a crazy part. Think about this. If they're going to throw at week 6, when do you start practicing an approach? You got to at least have like 2 to 3 weeks in there. So literally at week 2, we started going ladder and getting them used to it. And at week 3, we were like, all right, like we got to go out and do this. We got to have some type of stability and awareness of what's about to happen. So we did walking approach. You can do like short distance, like 1 or 2 step. You can do like, I don't know, 5, 6 step. You can go halfway. You can do full distance. And so we didn't go out full distance throws until I think that 5th week, just to test it. So we did modified approaches, short steps at week 3. And at that point, what we did was we did leukotape. We did elasticon. So if you don't use these tapes very often, I mean, working with athletic trainers, I learned a tremendous amount. So I'm very, very grateful. And just getting exposure to, I mean, every tape that you can imagine, and they all have their benefits. And when you have the resources to use them, they're super expensive per roll. So we would use an entire roll per practice. And so we would tape this person with swelling reduction, like elastic based taping, like kinesiology based taping. We would then have elasticon, just to have pressure going up and pumping lymphatic fluid up. And then we would have coverall leukotape on top of that, and then elasticon to block that medial component so they had no instability. I tried several versions, like tibial rotation taping, but they like the medial blocking, basically like almost like an MCL style of taping. So the taping techniques, they mentioned they like loved it. It felt great. Their skin got irritated, of course. But the problem was it actually felt better than just having the brace on. So here we go, just irritating that skin. So we had to come up with strategies. When you tape skin, there's a couple things that you can do. And like things like this, I'm going to be talking about the course on March 12th and 13th of 2022. And that's my sports PT accelerator. If you try and tape somebody too much, and you might ask, like, why are you taping them so much? When you have a short time like this and it's their dream, you better believe I'm throwing every tape. I'm throwing duct tape at them. I will do anything, Gorilla Tape, glue, I'll do it all. And that's what they're looking for too, is the resource. So do I tape every day? Not all the time, but when a case like this, you better believe it. So I ended up taping, and we were doing 5 days in a row, or they would go 3 days on, 1 day recovery, 2 days on, 1 day recovery. So like I think Thursday and Sunday were Thursday was relative rest, Sunday was absolute rest. So Friday and Saturday Saturday was throwing day, and I think Wednesday was throwing day. So 2 days a week they were throwing, and they were still in the weight room because they have to maintain that muscle mass. We talked about this. You can't have power without mass. And so when you start losing mass, you're going to start losing that power output. So there's no way you can throw the same distance by losing muscle mass. Just not possible unless you get faster. But when you're injured, that's not going to happen. So we're going to obviously lose acceleration. You can't keep acceleration when you're not training and you're injured. So you can't drop your muscle mass and expect to have the same output, because you're already losing acceleration. So you actually have to keep the muscle mass that you have. So that's why they were working nutrition, to try and keep that as high as possible. Weeks 3, we started throwing short distance, just one step approach, fully taped. And then as that week progressed, even I think week 3 and week 4, we went mid distance, just walking, like short. And believe it or not, I think I don't quote me on this, but some of their performance was like they were throwing like 50 to 70% of their like max or like their PR with just walking approaches, which is disgusting. That's just absolute power and like just from the trunk, core, and arm reach to be able to do that, because most of javelin is the speed approaching and that block being transferred, and the arm is just the final component. So they were able to produce quite a bit with just walking. So we talked about strategy. I work with a coach very closely. What strategies can we do to be able to get this person to throw a little bit more efficiently? So we worked on small things, med ball throws, over the head, a lot of sit-ups work. So whatever we could do to get more than just using the legs. And it's a very, very hard equation. We worked on glute work, we worked on calf, you name it, we did it. But ultimately, what it came down to is simulating that blocking approach. So as we threw in more and more, they now had to test it. And I knew that that was going to be the barrier. And I remember exposing it early on. And some people were like, why would you test it so early? You have a non-operative ACL tear. Why are you testing it? Because that's the determinant. We know if people's subjective report of return to sport is lower their functional testing, their risk of injury is higher. Why? Because they don't believe that they are safe to go back to sport, yet their knee shows it, but they're not ready. So the one thing you can do while people are injured, and the lessons I can pick up off of this is one of them. If people are injured, support the psychological side and expose them to the movements without the load or the intensity or the volume so that they feel comfortable going into it. Meaning, if you have a soccer athlete who's, they've had an ACL tear, and maybe they're college or high school, whatever it is, you better believe I'm going to let them touch the ball. I'm going to let them like do walking ladder drills. I'm going to let them do some basic fundamentals so they can feel that and they're like, oh, it's not that bad. And you want to just give some graded exposure to the things that give them confidence. And graded exposure, right? And gradual, just real nice and easy. Don't give them like false hope. That's not what we do. But I think when you give them that opportunity, their confidence will just boost. And yes, like I'd rather have somebody who's overly confident with not a lot of like, they're still not ready physically, than somebody who's like, you've been working for a year and their physical tests are 100%, but their mental capacity is 70, 80. They're just not ready. Put all this work in. What you didn't do is expose them early and give them that confidence. And that's where you went wrong. And I do blame that on providers, because I think that it's our job to set them up for success. Yeah, there are other variables, they're physicians and everything else like that, but it's our job to set them up. So week 4, start actual mid distance. Week 5, this is where it got spicy. So then we started doing power cleans. Week 4, we started doing power cleans, all power movements. We had to get them used to extension based, even if it was vertical, even though the force on a javelin is through the ground. That's why we use power positions. So we were just working on terminal knee extension. So slight knee bend, maybe 30, 40 degrees, and going into full terminal extension and going into hyperextension if needed to. Why? Because you're like, why would you push that? Because that's part of the sport. And you can control the reps, you can control the weight, you control the load. First, we started with just like a weight vest. Why add another implement, right? So we just did weight vest. Weight vest, started doing cleans. Then you can add an implement, right? You can add a med ball, you can add whatever you want. Then you can do a barbell, whatever it is. And that's why you work with experts who are like phenomenal at this with the strength coach. All you have to do is say like, hey, we got to work on terminal knee extension, terminal knee extension with a little bit of load, and high intensity, low load, just to create exposure. And they're like, oh, I can work with that. And good strength coaches will kind of work with you on figuring those things out, because that's what their domain is, right? They were still working on bench press, everything that we can do to get some more explosiveness. And their main job was to keep their nervous system high, because once you stop training, you slow down. It's not like riding a bike. You don't just get that back. I mean, that's graded exposure. That's training over time. So they worked on central nervous system development. I worked on the confidence. I worked on developing what it took to get a knee drive and extension and feeling good, putting your whole body over that. Now, I will say that they had a lot of challenge with confidence going into terminal knee extension, even to hyperextension. And rightfully so. You have to understand why. So then we discovered at week 4, we started blocking the knee going into hyperextension. So created like almost like an X tape across the calf and hamstring. And what that did, combined with 5 degrees of knee flexion on the brace, it limited literally their terminal extension. So even if they went to throw at 60, 50, 50, 60%, they weren't able to. Like, they had to throw a lot of weight onto their knee to go into hyperextension. It's just not possible. So we blocked that as much as possible. And that's what they loved. They actually loved the feeling. They're like, I feel way more secure. So you can add a little bit of tibial rotation plus the X tape to block the hyperextension, plus the brace, plus the elasticon, plus everything else. It's like their knee is, I mean, solid. And at this point, we had to have a discussion. Is this a go or not? Right. And I always look to the athlete. Before I answer that, I say, you know, what do you feel? I'll give you everything I have. I'll give you my numbers, but I need to know where you're at. What's your, what is your subjective rating? We did like any functional need testing score we did, right? And I wanted to have the objective, but I also want to have the subjective, because after working with so many high-level athletes, the subjective report has become a much bigger factor than I used to have in the past. With people who are very motivated, that subjective report is massive. So a couple takeaways right off the top. We'll say, number one, use the subjective rating or RPE or whatever it is of their percent improvement. Use that quite a bit. Use taping as much when you can. Work backwards. Is this possible? Don't be limited by your resources. Ask, would you be willing to train twice a day? Like, what do you want out of this? Use the team that you have, or create a team of really good healthcare professionals who can help you on this. And once that athlete sees what you're doing, their belief and confidence in you goes up. And could somebody, my wife has asked me this, could somebody have done the same rehab on their own? No. This is a tough case. This is a very, very tough case. You need people, you need team, you need resources. Now having gone through this, if I didn't have all those resources, I would try and find them. I would have that athlete rent them or purchase all those things. I'd find a local acupuncturist. I'd find a local massage therapist to team up with. I find a local physician, a sports psychs, a nutrition. I'd be making phone calls in 24 hours. Who do I know? How can I help? Hey, I need help. I don't. This is not my specialty. I need your help. Where can you help? Now, obviously, these are resources. I'm talking about a professional athlete who's about to accomplish a dream. So what I'm saying is, this is like far-fetched on one side of the bell curve. Many of you will not have this experience, but just know that's your framework. Like, it's possible. So everything like that's not close to that, you can add in that whatever you want. The sky's the limit. What it comes down to is your creativity and your ability to explain that to the person you're serving. I think people are afraid to tell people that they can help them, but they need to, pay extra for going to this person, or they're going to have to spend more on orthotics or doing all these things. And what you fail to remember is, it's not your dream. It's not your joint. It's not your body. It's nothing about you. And I think when you put yourself first, you as a clinician, I think that's very selfish. I think what you need to do is tell them literally, like, here's the options. If I were you and you want this to happen, like you've been training a whole year for this marathon and you're 3 weeks out, I would buy this. I would go to see this person. I would see me this many times, and I would change this one thing about your running form. And when you explain it that way, let them make the decision. And I think sometimes we're like, no, they can't afford it. That's your fault. Don't impose your beliefs on them. And after working with these athletes, I understand, like, man, I would throw the kitchen sink at them if they really wanted it. And I would offer it to them, and they can figure out whatever they want. Very fortunate to have those resources. Now, week 4, work with strength coach. We start working on plyo progressions. Week 5, we start hitting it, got spicy. We were going 75% approach. I don't think we ever hit a full approach leading up to the 6 weeks, because we were going to just literally go all out. And in this case, it makes more sense to take that approach, because why would you risk flaring them up? Just go all out for one throw. That's it. Like, let's do it. Make the semis, make the quarters, whatever it is. And this person was coming in as number one. So I think they already had to bypass some qualifiers, or whatever the ranking was. And all they had to hit was certain marks to get to a certain point. So we actually didn't approach full approach. I think we had 75%. Week 5, full taping, skin's irritated as can be, still twice a day, soft tissue, all the elements, all the modalities, working with the strength coach. And then the coach finally took over and they were able to start implementing a little bit more different strategies. And I would walk down to practices every single time. All right, what are we working on? Let me see what's happening. I'd film it. I'd try to see what's happening to the knee, slow-mo, like what is happening, how much of a knee bend. And obviously when you have a knee bend and you're about to do that final throw and you can't hyperextend, you're relying so much more on your lumbar spine and your shoulder to take it. So now you have to battle the new aches and pains that are coming in with the compensations, right? But that's just the nature of the game. There's only 2 ways you can approach people when it comes to their health and their fitness. You correct or compensate. You can't correct the ACL, so you literally have to compensate. So because of the compensations, other joints are going to take a lot of that force. So we started with the quantity of throws that started was somewhere less than 10 per practice, and across the week it was 30. And then that was week 3. Week 4 we went up 10-20%, and then we just went up to their standard at week 5, if that's 50 throws across the week or whatever that number is, and we were going 75% distance and 75% intensity. And believe it or not, they were doing pretty good. They were hitting about 70 to 80% of their PR. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, this stuff is working. We'll take it, right? And at some point you're nervous, man. You're just thinking about this case night and day. You're like, can I help this person? This was the height. Like I think I was only like 5 or 6 years into my career. And so this was like the highlight of my career. I was like, this case would mean so much to me because I care about this human so much, and it's a case that I want to be able to nail and help somebody with, right? Especially like the background story to it. So nonetheless, they go to the Olympics. That's the crazy part. They actually make the Olympics. Like they show up and they participate. And I think they got to the quarterfinals and they just couldn't do it. Like the knee couldn't take it, and they couldn't get the numbers they needed, the marks that they needed in order to be successful at that level. I mean, talking about the world's best. And when you start dwindling down to the like top 20 in the world, you're only gonna take it so far. So what you're hoping is that other people, and I've heard this before, that when you show up to the Olympics, it's anybody's game. It's all the hard work to get there. But some of the marks, if you look at Olympic marks can be like average marks across a whole year. It's not like people, not rarely do you get like world records at the Olympics, and that's amazing. You might get some Olympic records, but sometimes not everybody shows their performance doesn't match what they've done before. And so what you're hoping for is when you go to the games, maybe they have a bad time and you have a decent time and you guys match. So this person made to the quarterfinals, but they made it. And now I have to ask to all the listeners, do you think that you would have been able to take a non-operative ACL 6 weeks to get to the Olympics? Is that possible? Is it textbook? Would your mentors, anybody that you work with, tell you otherwise? I'm telling you, it's totally possible. I've seen it. I've lived it. And I'm very proud. I mean, I questioned every step of it, but that's just my nature because I'm a perfectionist. I'm OCD, and I wanted this person to succeed. So here's my thought, and don't think it's cliche. Anything is possible, man. This case showed me so much that anything is possible, and this person is very dear to my heart. This case, we got to know each other very, very well. We literally working 2-3 times a day. I mean, you spend that many hours with people 7 days a week for 6 weeks, you kind of get to know them, right? And they're vulnerable. You have to understand. And so you have really good discussions about their dreams and why they do it and the stories of how they got there and like the amount of time and money and things they have to overcome to get to that point. And you start to believe in people more, believe it or not. And that's the crazy part, that that belief helps you as a clinician push more. You're like, mm, that's that's amazing what you have to get there. I will help get you one more step. So this person didn't qualify beyond, I think, the qualifying round, but they're an Olympian. That is something that people strive to say their whole life. Like, I don't know about you, I haven't been to the Olympics like as an Olympian. I'm not an Olympian, but this person is, and I don't forget. And I think a lot of clinicians try and take mm, they try and take ownership of like helping people recover and get back to the thing they wanted to. There's so many layers. You're not the only person. You are one of many. And I was one of many who helped one person during a short period stint in their life to help them get to that point. I've heard other people say like, well, I helped this person get to the Olympics. No, no, you didn't. You helped support them with a lot of other people to get to that point. And for this person, I was a very, in a small window, I helped them achieve their dreams. And that to me is very fulfilling. And that's why I do my job. And uh, I think that's why all of you do it. You don't do it because you want these cases and you want to start them. You want it because you want to feel good about what you do. And cases like this remind you of that. And I wanted to share because it was probably one of my top tough cases that I've had to manage. And I had to work with a lot of people and I had to use my resources and I had to use everything that PT school didn't teach me was how to manage somebody to get them from an acute injury. Like I think we got them day 2, right? They injured it, right? I mean, for some people, it's like within after 24 hours, but before 36. So day 2 of injury. And I had every opportunity to work from day 2 to day 6 until they got into that plane, to week 26, week 6 until they got into that plane. So what would you do with these people? What would you have done differently? And I don't want to know the magical exercise. Like that's the exercise. I think that's, not irrelevant. I think in the grand scheme, when you go from week 2 to week 4, I don't think doing a straight leg raise versus a knee extension versus a hip bridge, like I think those are all important, but the framework of like supporting and guiding somebody and giving them bumpers, meaning don't do this, work with this, what can they do in the weight room? Those are all really good because it helps a coach, it helps a whole team understand the recovery process a little bit better. So what would you have done differently? And I'm only adding that in to like, okay, so knowing what you know now, what would you have done? My lessons learned was you can push harder than you believe. And tape is magical. The confidence building is massive. What I would do, the lesson I learned was build the confidence, build the psychological side, get graded exposure so that they have belief in themselves. And then the physical will just follow because they got to believe that they are in good hands and they're going to achieve what you're talking about. So you're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk. So nonetheless, I think that you have to add all those things in, and there's multiple components along this rehab process that maybe I would have modified just a touch, but nonetheless, I'm very, very confident and happy with where it went, and I'm glad they're an Olympian, and that's such a rewarding feeling in my career, and I wanted to share with you guys, and I hope that you get this opportunity too. I don't know where you're at in your professional career. Some of you guys are students, and some of you are new grads, and some are your veterans trying to change up and get some more rewarding components to your career. So I completely understand that side of it as well. Nonetheless, if you guys are interested in hearing more of these cases and how to manage these people from a fresh injury, maybe not the Olympics, but I'm just saying like somebody who has a fresh injury and they're going back to soccer and they want to be able to do that in a very short timeline, and maybe the glute bridges and clamshells and core work might not be the end all be all, but you might need a better framework around like, what am I missing? Do I need to add more taping? Do I need to change my swelling reduction? What other modalities can I add in the short term? Is it better to package this way? Do you move more aggressive on the front end, on the back end? Everything's case by case, but what I want to be able to share is my framework on the rationale on acute injury management. I spent a lot of time with athletic trainers who've taught me tremendously during my residency and working at the Olympic Training Center, people with all over the world and everybody has a different style. And I really appreciate that. And so putting that all together, I want to be able to share the framework that I use, the framework that I teach my team at Sports Performance, with the public, with you guys, with anybody around the world. We are going to have, for this upcoming course in Sports PT Accelerator on March 12th and 13th, 2022, we're going to have a live option and then a hybrid portion. The live option, as of now, we're only going to have, I think, 10 seats in person, and the rest are going to be virtual. So excited to have everyone there. If you guys are interested, it's a different course. It's more of a retreat. Get together, have some coffee with me, have some beverages afterwards, get to know who you are, your story, and yeah, just share stories about professional career and where you want to go. And my next step is my first step was to help athletes, right? Like in my community. And my next step is to help my PT community literally be able to do the same and beyond. That is kind of my vision for the future. So that is it. That is the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. One of the most complicated cases that I've had. And I'll tell you some more. There's some more ACLs in short timelines that I have come across, and I'm excited to share. So I hope you guys are well. Enjoy your week. Hope that you guys are doing well and living your dreams. So I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Take care, guys. Bye.